it's rough, and it takes all that you've got, but he's been here, just waiting for you to knock. So take his hand and plant your feet on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock.
Hi, welcome to Life on the Rock. If you remember a couple of years ago, we did a show on Frontline Faith about passing out the MP3 players with teachings of the faith and music and catechesis. Well, tonight we're doing a follow-up show on that with Lieutenant Colonel Laura Bozeman and Father Bob Higgins. They're going to tell us about the program and their experience with it and the fruit of it, how it's helped our soldiers. Good to see you, Doug.
You too, Padre.
And you've got some speaking engagements coming up.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up. I mentioned this last week. Coming up this weekend, starting on the 9th, I will be in California for 5 days. The Battle Ready Rally speaking tour, basically. And I'm going out to Madera, Hanford, Paso Robles, Covina, and San Diego to put on a series of talks. Basically, it's prayer, talks, sacrament of confession. It's a rally, though. It's about waking us up to the reality of the spiritual fight that's going on, and really trying to help rally more troops to get involved in deep prayer, sacraments, and get active in the areas that we need to evangelization. You can go to my website, battlereadystrong.com. Again, battlereadystrong.com. Go to the events page and check out the entire schedule there. And if you want to set up a rally in your area, somewhere in the country, give me a call. Even out of the country, give me a call or email us through our website, battlereadystrong.com, and we will come to your location and do that. We're also working on rallies in Louisiana area and South Texas in the coming months. So please check it out, battlereadystrong.com, and join us in California in the next several days. I'll be out there coming up in just a couple of days. Look forward to seeing you there.
That's great. You know, Doug, I know on the show we talk a lot about sacramental life and prayer, and I hope we communicate about the greatness of marriage. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit on this opening segment. And because I've heard it said that, you know, even today we're trying to even just convince people to get married, you know, not just cohabitate and, of course, to be open to life and things. Well, our Holy Father, Pope Francis, recently addressed the Pontifical Council for the Family, and he gave a wonderful speech about the family and its greatness. And I just wanted to mention some of the points he makes. He says that obviously a family is a community of persons, and it's more than just the sum of the persons that belong to it. He said it's a place where one learns to love. It is the natural center of human life. And he says that the family is the driving force of the world and of history. And we speak of it as just being the absolute foundation of society, that all of humanity passes through the human cell of the family, and the way of the family is the way of the world, right? Because it's just so critical, and you know, to our strength, who we are. He says it is made up of faces of people who love, dialogue, make self-sacrifices for one another, defend life, especially the most vulnerable. You know, so there's this tremendous place of education, but also this place where we first experience love. He says spousal and familial love also clearly reveals the vocation of the person to love in a unique way and forever, and that the trials, sacrifices, and crises of couples, as well as of the family as a whole, represent pathways for growth and goodness. Right? You know, marriage, the spousal love, reveals our fundamental vocation to love, that we're made to be loved and to share love, right? And that is witnessed to by the family experience in the family. And he says, in marriage, we give ourselves completely without calculation or reserve, sharing everything, gifts and hardship, trusting in God's providence. This is the experience that the young can learn from their parents and grandparents. We heard that theme in World Youth Day. He talked about the role of grandparents and the elderly forming the young. And we need to teach our young people about, you know, how to love, how to sacrifice for one another, and and family is especially the place to do that.
Yeah, it's very easy in our world today to, as the Holy Father has talked about, marginalize not only the young but the elderly. And that was a big point he did bring up about the elderly have a responsibility, those who have lived and have many years under their belt, the responsibility to pass that wisdom and that experience on to the young. And it's important that the young are open to that. That you know, that even myself in my middle years am open to the wisdom of those who have gone before me, who are older than me, who can help me learn, you know, about things that I'm still have yet to experience in life. And that whole family element is one of the great areas where the devil attacks, because to disrupt the family, disrupt the balance and the harmony and the beauty and the peace of a family is effectively disrupting so much of society, because society is made up primarily of us families. And it is critical to take this to heart. And I love the fact that this Holy Father keeps bringing this up in one way or another. That, you know, these elements, don't forget this. Don't let this slip away.
Right. And I remember Pope Emeritus Benedict speaking about the evangelization that the family does. What a powerful evangelization and the witness that family life is. And Pope Francis echoes this very theme. He says, the good news of the family is a very important part of evangelization, which Christians can communicate to all by the witness of their lives. And already they are doing so. This is evident in secularized societies. Truly Christian families are known by their fidelity, their patience, their openness to life, and by their respect for the elderly. The secret to this is the presence of Jesus in the family. So you have this natural reality written in our human natures of the family. As Catholics, that's raised to the dignity of a sacrament, where Jesus is present in that marriage, in that family, to strengthen that couple in their love and to bear this eloquent witness. Why? Because we all crave that. We all want to be loved. We want to love in return. We see that in the family, and that highlights and calls us to Christianity, to a relationship with Jesus, because that's where we experience love.
Right.
So those are important points, I think, for us, and maybe we help our young people, you know, to realize the greatness of family and marriage. So, well, tonight we'll be talking about Frontline Faith with Lieutenant Colonel Laura Bozeman and Father Bob Higgins. So don't go away. We'll be back in a moment.
Welcome back to Life on the Rock. I'm Doug Barry, along with Father Mark Murray. We are your Rock House compadres. You're in the Rock House, and tonight's show is on Frontline Faith. And as Father mentioned in the first segment, we have done something on Frontline Faith a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, and we're very fortunate to have them back and talk a bit more about this incredible mission work. And it is mission work. It's something we forget sometimes about how important evangelization in the military is. A lot of men and women who are out there stationed, a lot of families all over the world, and the Catholic faith needs to reach them. It's critical. It's essential. We're all created for this mystery of God, and so Frontline Faith is a powerful way to help make that happen and to assist in the mission work. And we've got a couple very powerful missionaries in their own right here with us tonight. Father Bob Higgins, good to have you on the show tonight, and Lieutenant Colonel Laura Bozeman. Good to have you as well on the show. Congratulations on Frontline Faith being part of it. It's a powerful missionary work. We can start with you, Laura, if you don't mind me calling you Laura.
Oh, please.
I feel like I should salute you, but give you the Roman salute.
Stand at ease.
Thank you very much. You're 21 years, you said?
21 years active duty. I did Army ROTC out of Texas Christian University.
Okay.
And I did a year in Afghanistan, summer of 2011 to summer of 2012. And that's when I first learned about the Frontline Faith Project.
Okay, so you were over there in the field when it came to your attention then?
Yes.
Okay.
And I was in the Kabul base cluster at Camp Eggers, and we had the one priest for 21 different locations all throughout the capital of Afghanistan.
Now, I want to make mention of that again, because when you mentioned that before the show, that's a striking point that a lot of us, especially here in the United States, I think, can very easily take for granted. 21 separate locations, and one priest has the duty to care for the Catholics in all those 21 different locations.
Correct. So Father Alan Irizarry was our priest for most of my deployment, and then we had Father Ferdinand Madu. And there are so few Army chaplains, Catholic chaplains, you get to know them over your service career. But Father would give Mass at Camp Eggers and at the International Security Assistance Force headquarters, which he could walk to, where we were at specifically. But the rest of the time he'd have to take the roads, which were very dangerous, or Black Hawk helicopter to fly to these other locations. And as the crow flies, it may not look like a long journey, but it could take a good 2 hours each way. And sometimes he'd only be able to say Mass once a month at one of those posts. And if there was a security situation where he was not permitted to travel, that meant no Mass. So the MP3 players are a way to bring that to the deployed personnel. My personal experience from Afghanistan. But if you have a sailor who's on a submarine, you're not going to have a chaplain.
Sure.
How does that sailor participate in Mass? The MP3 player, you don't need to have a Wi-Fi connection, which is kind of hard to get when you're way down under the waves.
Right. And all the security stuff that goes with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, kind of tough. And Father Bob Higgins, tell us about your experience and your involvement in armed forces and all.
Well, I was introduced to the Frontline Faith Project I'm the state chaplain for the Knights of Columbus in the state of South Carolina. And at our state convention last year, the founder of Frontline Faith presented me with a MP3 player. I'm also the chaplain at the Ralph H. Johnson VA Medical Center. So it just became a natural thing that the Knights of Columbus, who sponsor this program as well, for me to use that with the veterans in the VA hospital. And South Carolina being a very heavily influenced military state with a lot of military in it, there's a lot of veterans there and a lot of military bases. It just became a natural that with the Knights of Columbus, many of them being veterans, to distribute it and use it as well.
Right. And the great thing about the MP3 player is, I mean, there's an enormous amount of information loaded on these. And so it's not just, you know, sermons and such, but there's all sorts of other things on there. We're going to break that down a little bit here. I know we've got a video we're going to be cutting to in just a little bit. Can you explain what video we're going to be seeing? Laura, does this kind of give more detail on what Frontline Faith is all about?
Nice snapshot overview, absolutely. Well, it had the Mass, it has the Rosary. I wound up getting a player and sending it to my husband, who was having a rough time in Hawaii. You wouldn't think Hawaii is a bad place to be when your spouse is deployed, but any place can be hard.
Right.
So he could hear some of the things that I was listening to myself. When I was feeling down, the letters from children really made a difference for me. You have kids reading letters with appreciation for our armed forces. And you get care packages, but at night being able to listen to their voices really made a difference. It has a Mass, it has different prayers, absolutely. It has the Rosary, but 7 hours of content, so you can skip within the menu to what you need at that particular point in time.
And there's something about it that's powerful. You know, Father Mark, you know, we do so many shows and we talk a lot about, even what the Holy Father has mentioned about culture of encounter and experiencing, the importance of experiencing Christ in different forms and in different ways. And this is a powerful way to experience rather than just, you know, a book or a pamphlet, which is good. But when you say hearing voices of children, or the voice of a priest preaching, or the voice of others praying, that's powerful because we're creatures of sensation and we're affected by sight, touch, smell, sound, and so forth.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great video right here. Let's go check out the video and then we'll get back more into Frontline Faith. Here you go.
Hi, I'm Sherry Lamonte, host of the Mary's Touch radio show, the show that brings you real-life stories of Mary's love. Our outreach program is the Frontline Faith Project. We supply our armed forces with MP3 players, little recorders that are loaded with over 7 hours of spiritual content. Our military tells us they need spiritual support, and as one Army chaplain put it after receiving the players, thanks for bringing God to our soldiers and our soldiers to God. We've given over 31,000 players to our troops, but they need more. Help us distribute the much-needed Frontline Faith player. And as one chaplain put it, it's the best weapon our military has ever had.
Our son was catastrophically injured in March of 2003, and I don't know what I would have done without our friends, family, and the grace of God on our family's life. The Frontline Faith Project has done an amazing job of bringing our word to our troops in the field to fill that void, and we have been blessed to be a part of it.
Everyone has something that they place in their lives. We call the great good God. Some of them don't know that yet, and it's our responsibility and, as I said, opportunity to make sure that they are given the tools to reach out in such a way. And I think that things like Frontline Faith or any other organization that can be placed in the hands and in the ears, therefore in the minds of our troops, is going to be a good thing, because we want those who defend us to be defending an ideal, defending the good, defending something that they truly believe in. And belief, faith, all of those are the basis for a strong nation.
Again, it's very easy to forget what's going on. We sit in our comfortable day-to-day life. Most of us pretty comfortable, and you know, now and then when you see images like this, like this video just showed, it's easy to forget that as we sit here right now, there are people in incredibly difficult circumstances on a physical level, let alone emotional or spiritual. And I know for my own sake, you know, my own self, I live in a great place where I can go to confession. You know, let me think, there's at least a couple of churches in Lincoln that have confessions 2-3 times a day, morning, lunchtime, evening. I mean, it's just there. It's very, very, very present. But these are places where that's not always there. And the normal stress load of the average civilian, if you will, while it can be tough at times, it's a little different than the stress load of a soldier who's out in the field or in various places of the world, even just being deployed, not living near family or home in the separation. Can both of you talk a little bit about that, and then and tell us about people that you have you know, seen the MP3 player go to and how it has affected them? Laura, if we could start with you.
Well, we had daily mass at Camp Eggers, and Father gave a Sunday morning mass, but it doesn't always work for people's schedules. And you might think, well, why is that? But you're working 7 days a week, 12-hour minimum duty days, so from 8 in the morning to 8 at night. And I saw personnel, not just from the Army, but we had all branches and coalition allies were able to use the MP3 player and have that, you mentioned it, connection that you get from sound versus just reading. Bibles were plentiful. We had rosaries. There was a group out of Atlanta, Georgia that would send them in for us, lovely, made out of just cord, so it wouldn't make a rattle in your pocket. But with the MP3 player, if you are feeling down, you can listen to some music. If you weren't able to make it to Mass, Mass is there. So the people I know who particularly benefited from it were the ones who weren't able to make it to Mass. And the challenge we have in the military is there's so few Catholic chaplains. Last I heard, 281 for all of the military. 281 for all of the military.
281 Catholic priests for the entire military. And what are we talking about number-wise? Because this isn't just the soldiers. This is their families in different locations around the world.
All over the world. Well, the Army is about 400,000. When I was stationed in Korea, we had one priest for Seoul. You have situations where you bring in contract priests, so civilian priests who help to augment, but when you're in the combat zone, it's not always possible to find someone who meets all the requirements. There's physical requirements that contractors have to satisfy to go into that austere environment where you may not have definitive medical care, the ability to provide a special diet, and so on. So the chances in the combat zone of having a priest reduce even further. So the MP3 player brings that resource, not as good as having a priest right there with you, but that resource in your pocket.
All right. Well, we want to make mention for all you out there watching or listening right now, if you want to assist our soldiers out there and others in our military armed forces all over the world, you can do that by going to frontlinefaithproject.org. Very simple, frontlinefaithproject.org, and a simple donation of $24 can put a player, an MP3 player, in the hand of a soldier. $24 can put an MP3 player in the hand of a soldier. So for $24, you can very, very easily impact someone's soul, their eternal soul. No pressure. No pressure, just 24 bucks. Let me think, what do we spend $24 on? You know, you go out, you buy a new shirt, you buy some shoes, you buy a pair of shoes, you know, that's 2 or 3 MP3 players right there for some people, if not more. You know, go and do a movie, you know, I mean, those things are fine, they have their place, but let's not forget that for a small fee, for a small donation, we can help people on an incredibly powerful level. Very, very powerful level. So please consider that. FrontlineFaithProject.org, $24, one donation, $24, one MP3 player. Do the math, 48, 2, and so forth and so on. And there's a lot more that can be given out there. Over 31,000, as you saw in the video, have been given out so far. Let's do something about that. Let's raise that number. FrontlineFaithProject.org. Don't go away. We'll be back after this break with more from Father Bob Higgins and Lieutenant Colonel Laura Bozeman. Back after this. Welcome back to Life on the Rock. Doug Barry here along with Father Mark, the Rock House Compadres, the official and only Rock House Compadres in the world, just in case you didn't know that. But here we are with Father Bob Higgins and Lieutenant Colonel Laura Bozeman from the Army, and we're talking about FrontlineFaithProject.org. Powerful ministry of distributing MP3 players filled with 7 hours of Catholic content to soldiers all over the world. Over 31,000 have gone out all over the world by the generosity of people such as yourself watching and listening right now. And as we mentioned before the break, $24 is the donation amount to put one MP3 player in the hand of a soldier. And very powerful. And during the break you said something, Laura, I want to get back to you, is that these little MP3 players have been a great and very powerful spiritual warfare weapon, because it has not only kept some people strong in the faith, but what else has it done?
It's brought people back to the faith. We had a Marine Corps colonel who would distribute these after Mass at Camp Eggers, and he'd say, if you know somebody who is Catholic and hasn't been coming to Mass, give them an MP3 player. And we actually had some people come back to the church in Afghanistan. And it's that reaching out, that connection. Yeah. You can make that physical contact with your battle buddy and say, hey, I think you'll like this. Then he or she's listening to it, and the next thing you know, they're coming back to Mass. Yeah,
some serious spiritual combat right there. So true and so needed, so necessary. So again, FrontlineFaithProject.org, you can help make this happen on a broader and wider scale. Father Mark?
Laura, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about how it touched you to see this Frontline Faith in action.
I'd not heard of the program until I was in Afghanistan, but I was so impressed with the outpouring of support that this represents for all of us who are in harm's way. And then the effect I would see it would have on my fellow soldiers and me personally. I was asked if I'd like to do an interview with Mary's Touch Radio talking about the way my husband and I used it during my deployment. My husband's medically retired from the Army, so it touches on your wounded warrior outreach type programs. And so this is not just for people who are still in, but those who've served. And we were touching on when you're in the military, you're not a machine. Sometimes people think you are. You can make it through the battle, but what happens after the battle? The initial after effects or the long-term after effects? That spiritual aftercare that we've become much more attuned to nowadays for people who have post-traumatic stress disorder and the like. And it was very difficult during my deployment for my husband, 14-hour time zone difference away, knowing that I was in Kabul, and you could reassure him that I was doing fine and doing my best to stay safe. But his personal experiences in Baghdad, Iraq, kind of made him less willing to believe that I was okay. So we talked as much as we could on Skype and on the phone, but we had this resource too. And I think it was very helpful for him knowing that I was listening to that rosary. It might be a different time of day for him, but he was able to say the rosary with that exact same prompting.
And you know, you mentioned it earlier too about the audio, because I remember listening to the Mass and the audio, and there's something special about maybe leaving the rest of it to our imagination, but hearing maybe the chants used at Mass, how we can really spiritually unite with Masses around the world, and there's something powerful about the audio presentation of it, I think.
Absolutely. There's a Mass being said at some time, any given moment. I love that aspect about the universal church. We've been stationed in lots of different countries, and you can use your missal and go into that church, and you may not understand the language, but you follow along, you know where you're at for that day and what Mass is being said, and you're part of that community.
And it must also be so reassuring to hear these rituals, just the Rosary, the Mass, how that can bring us back to that space, you know, that our own experience of worship. So,
absolutely. I deployed as an individual augmentee, so we got general absolution at Fort Benning before flying out into the war zone, and it just really brings it home to you. The challenge is that closeness that you develop with your faith in the combat zone to maintain it once you're back. And all the resources we can use to help people, for example, in our Veterans Administration hospitals, to maintain that faith after that adrenaline rush, after the long days, the constantly being busy. When you have the quiet hours when you're back home, it's very important.
And Father Bob, that's an area you do a lot of work in the VA hospitals and such. Can you tell us how you've seen this affect people in your area of work?
Well, it's interesting how this technology was meant for the front line, but how it's morphed itself into the opposite end of the spectrum. Over the past year, I started working at the Ralph H. Johnson VA Medical Center, and when I went in, you know, it's a full medical center with a hospice and outpatient clinics, and you know, I began to see a pattern there that a lot of the soldiers, many of them who were Catholics, would come up and say, you know, Father, I haven't been to Mass in 40 years. And as I would go around to the different blood transfusions and those who were sitting there in chemotherapy, who had needles in their arms, getting the, you know, new life, they were just not happy. They were staring off into darkness. And when I was introduced to this, I thought, well, let me bring this to them. After hearing enough confessions and bring it to them, it's amazing how when sitting there in a chair receiving new blood or receiving chemotherapy, after months of listening to this and passing them out, how, you know, now I walk through the wards and they're smiling. And some of them are actually even mouthing the words to the songs that are on there. There's a whole new spirit throughout the center. Really, the other end of the spectrum is I've used it. We have palliative care and hospice patients who are, have cancer and who are diagnosed that they're going to die, maybe within 6 months or so. And at that very end of their life, this really represents where the rubber hits the road. As I say, many have said, Father, I've led a terrible life. You know, I've been away from the church and the sacraments for so long, and they're facing that final decision, that final moment in their life, and they're saying, can God forgive me? Where do I go from here? And many times families have a difficult time dealing with death, and the men and women, the veterans who are in the hospital, are alone, and I can't be there all the time. So I will distribute and give them a Frontline Faith player, generally in the last week of their life. And it's just amazing how they'll listen to that 24 hours a day. And to me, it's what's made this the happiest year of my priesthood, because it's, as I say, it's reality. It's where the rubber hits the road. When these people who are lived good lives as Catholics, and we all want to go to heaven, and we all seek God's forgiveness, helping them to reconcile with God at that last moment. That's a whole new form of frontline faith. It's the frontline faith of them going into heaven, making that transition over. And it's just been very, very, very powerful.
It's interesting that you mention, and it's a good point, that this whole project was designed to go out into the field of battle, so to speak, or people who are out there on the front lines. And yet, it really is a spiritual warfare type of tool in all these various areas of a person's life. And that's something that I think really brings to mind for all of us who are watching and listening, or all of us here, that in essence, isn't that what our faith is all about? It's about the fact that, and it's paragraph 409 in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. I have it on my website, battlereadystrong.com. We put on there, if we ever question that life is a battle, read this paragraph. Because it's very clear, the Church's teaching on this, that Christ makes it clear from the beginning to the end of our lives and of mankind, this serious conflict with the enemy is very, very evident and very much upon us. That's why we have priests here, not just because it's great pay and it's all the great perks that go with the priesthood, but the sacrifice, but being able to, and I've asked so many priests this question when you're hearing confessions, what's that like, especially new priests, and it's great to hear, to know that you're in this moment right now where there's this breaking of chains, being an instrument to break chains in people's lives by severing that chain of sin and freeing them, is what it's all about. That's what the crucifixion is all about. Mission has always been souls, and this is a great way to do that. And again, if you're just getting up on what we're doing here, this is frontlinefaithproject.org. You got to go to the website and check it out. MP3 players. These little guys right here. These little bad boys being distributed all over the world, over 31,000, 7 hours of content. This is a list of all the content that's in there, and you're seeing all kinds of incredible stuff. The rosary and the mass, homilies, prayers, songs, all this amazingly wonderful stuff that can do so much to benefit people's souls, their lives, their families. These soldiers who are out or coming back, and as you said, Laura, having to deal with the consequences of being in some sort of situation, conflict, and having to live the rest of their lives, or as you're saying, Father, where they're maybe on their deathbed or being told that they're nearing that, and their families are affected by those individuals. Therefore, with things such as this, we can affect their souls, their minds, their hearts. That affects obviously their families as well, does it not? I mean, it's powerful.
Absolutely, and a chaplain can't be there 24 hours a day in hospice care. This resource provides comfort, not just for the wounded warrior, the veteran, but the families as well.
And we hear so often, and Father, you, of course, because you've been at the network for so long. I've been coming down here for 5 years, but been very blessed to be here for 5 years now. But you've heard for so long, much longer than I, how many people rely on EWTN, on Catholic radio, on Catholic television. They just have it on in the background. They just have it on in their car. It's just the feeding of the constant Catholic content that's coming over the airwaves. But not everybody has Catholic radio in a VA hospital or in various places of the world. So this is the next best thing, is to have the recordings of the MP3. Yeah.
Some of the bases had Wi-Fi, but you didn't always have Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
It was not reliable, and that's why an MP3 player works better. It's portable, and even when you're away from your forward operating base, you've got the resource. And it doesn't take up a lot of space. It's not super heavy. It's compact, portable, very usable.
Yeah, like sleeping in a Humvee somewhere out in the desert. It's, this little thing is you're not going to feel it, but you're going to feel the impact of it. We're going to take a break right now and be back with a little bit more from Frontline Faith. Again, their website, frontlinefaithproject.org. Go check it out, and $24 donation can put an MP3 player like this little guy in the hands of a soldier or a family member of a soldier somewhere throughout this world and do amazing things to impact their soul. But we'll be back with more. Don't go away after this. Welcome back to Life on the Rock. This is our final segment of the show. Frontline Faith is the program, the project we're talking about. Frontlinefaithproject.org is their website. MP3 players distributed to soldiers throughout the world, over 31,000 so far. We are going to plead with you to go to their website, frontlinefaithproject.org, and prayerfully consider, and then after you prayerfully consider, go right ahead and make a $24 donation at least. That's what it takes. $24 puts an MP3 player like this little guy right here in the hands of a soldier somewhere or a family member somewhere in the world. Powerful stuff. 7 hours of content, powerful Catholic content, encouragement, support, the rosary, homilies, stories. Powerful stuff, very necessary to help our soldiers and their families throughout the world endure combat situations. Again, it's mission work. It's a whole different idea of mission work. We look at, you know, Father Mark Mary here with his full-blown brown habit, and this is what we think of oftentimes as missionary, and we don't think sometimes that missionary is with, you know, someone in the U.S. military, in a foxhole or in a Humvee or in some operating base somewhere in the world, or just in residence somewhere, in station somewhere. All the different scenarios all over the world, very incredible situations. Father, you had something?
Well, yes, Father, you work with our veterans, and you've heard some of their testimonies about this. Could you tell us some of those stories?
I can tell you all day long the stories. There's several I'd pick out in particular. You know, being a full-service hospital, generally the veterans don't come in the last days of their lives. We have established a relationship with them. So many times the veterans will come in, and we'll see them over and over and over again out on the floors, the general wards, before they transition into the long-term care facility and then eventually the hospice. And one that sticks out in particular, that one gentleman that just touched the lives of so many people in the hospital, it was that situation. He came in for a long period of time and was eventually found out to have cancer, and was actually in the hospital for over a month straight. Grew up a cradle Catholic, born, raised, baptized Catholic his whole life. Somewhere along the line, he had gotten away and became a naturalist and into these new age religions, and very, very intelligent with philosophy and all, but he lost his faith, and we would talk all the time. Every day I would stop in to visit him. And finally, about the last month of his life, I gave him an MP3 player, and when I wasn't there to talk to him, he would listen to this, and it was amazing how his conversation changed from being about nature and science and philosophy and New Age, about bringing it back to his roots. You know, there's some of the mass on there, and some of the homilies, and the music brought him back to his youth of you know, in the 40s and 50s. So that's sensual, you know, hearing that music again. At one point he said he could almost smell the incense. So that went on, and then he slipped into a coma. And even in the coma for the last days of his life, had the earplugs in and was listening to that. And we don't know when the soul leaves the body, but I can honestly say, and as many of the medical staff at the hospital say, it helped him to die in peace. And one of the reasons why we're on the show today is to promote the Frontline Faith Project, but there's a constant need. It's almost like rosaries. You know, people send us rosaries all the time, which are great and fantastic and good, and we all pray our rosary. But there's a never-ending need for these. One of the reasons are because when we do hand them out, and when we do distribute them to the veterans, to the patients, in the case of this gentleman who died, you know, because of infectious diseases, we can't take it back and use it for someone else. So in this case, the MP3 player was actually packed up in his belongings and shipped off to his family. And it generates a life of its own, that whole cycle of life, that months later, I got a letter from his sister. And she said, you know, I saw his MP3 player in there, and I started to use it. And it's helped me in my bereavement. It's helped me to come back to it. It's eased my pain and helped me to know the love and the forgiveness of God. So it's a whole cyclical thing that really helps us.
These are incredible stories you just told, Father, that, I mean, really cement, I guess is the word, you know, the importance of this type of instrument for evangelization. Because as you describe it, all I'm thinking to myself is, here you've got somebody who's struggled with belief system philosophies and so forth, and worldly things crept in, and naturalists and this and that, and New Age and all. And it's difficult sometimes, as any of us knows if you've been in a situation, conversation with someone, it can be difficult to converse with another individual. Pride can get in the way sometimes. We're all liable to fall into that. I do, you know, at least, you know, a couple times a year. It's a joke, of course. But, you know, I can be very prideful. It's easy for us to kind of reject. So if you're talking to me, Laura, about something in the faith, and I might not want to hear it, but there's something very non-threatening about a couple of earbuds coming out of a little thing like this, that, you know, you give it to the man, and he just puts him in at his own time, his own place. Nobody around him has to know what he's listening to. Nobody has to know what's challenging him, what he could be thinking. It's a very private and personal engagement, if you will, with God. And that's powerful. That's why, you know, Catholic radio is so important to be listening to in a car when you're driving down the road. Nobody knows what you're listening to. Who are the sisters we had on? The one sister would hide in the closet and listen to Catholic radio in the closet because their order had drifted away from the authority of Rome, and she and several of her sisters came back, but she was hiding in the closet listening
to Life on the Rock.
To Life on the Rock. She was listening to Life on the Rock. But there is something powerful about that. And did you find that in your own life when you were over in Afghanistan, Laura?
Oh, absolutely. You're constantly surrounded by people. I was fortunate to just have one roommate by my rank, but we had gals who had 2 or 3 roommates in the tiny little space. And what you could do with this is also kind of isolate, even if other people were in your containerized housing unit, have that little bit of a reprieve, that chance to have a connection beyond where you were at on that given day physically in Kabul, Afghanistan for me.
That allows you to go to a
happy place.
A happy place, yeah. It allows you to go to that happy place, but to meditate with God, to have that personal time, that personal connection.
Yes, and to know that so many people are pulling for us. You can say mission accomplished, you can say that we're pulling forces down to whatever the troop level will be, but the bottom line is we'll continue to have personnel serving in the armed forces. All branches, all components, various places around the world. So the need still exists, even if we're not in Afghanistan anymore.
You know, that's so true. I think about that when you think about World War II, Korean War, the 50s, World War II, 40s, Korean War, 50s, and we're still in Germany and Korea. We're still stationed there. Our soldiers are still there, holding down the fort and helping to keep peace, being a presence there. You know, you talk about being on a submarine. A friend of mine who was on subs first for a while, he's been in like 25 years now. He's EOD now, but he talked about subs, you know, 6 months out there, you know, and under the ocean for long periods of time on those nuclear, you know, tubes. that you live in, and that's an incredible time of someone's life.
Yes.
And it can be very pivotal. You know, you can bring you closer to God, can't it? Or it can be disruptive, can it not?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's so much out there that is less than godly. You can load up your whatever tech device you want with all kinds of horror movies and music that the lyrics, if you really pay attention to them, are not helping you to be closer to Christ.
Yeah. That was a very nice way of putting it, Laura. Helping you not get closer to Christ. Yeah.
What you listen to, what you watch, what you read, it has an impact. And a lot of people like to dismiss it and say, oh, it's just nice spa music. Okay. But what kind of message talking about the gentleman with his kind of pantheistic or pagan or New Age type drifting away? Or you can choose to listen to something that's actually food for the soul.
Right.
And another way that that's used to the other end of the spectrum is I do a lot of bell baptisms in the bell of the ship for the Coast Guard. And so I will give the MP3 player to normally it's the husband who's in the Coast Guard, and he'll go off and be deployed. And the wife will also, and the mother of the child will ask, can I have one? And so we'll give one to them as well. And one of the ways that they can also be used is you can plug them into a computer or a laptop, so they'll be broadcast over your sound system.
Yes.
And so one mother has said to me that what she does is she plugs it in while her husband's away, and this is her way of evangelizing and catechizing her child. She plays it over the speakers. So we're going from womb to tomb with this technology that it's a real teaching, evangelizing, catechizing tool.
Well, we've got just about 3 minutes, a little less than 3 minutes left in the show, and I want to make a plug, but before I do, what final thoughts would you have for the audience out there right now? Laura, we'll start with you.
Well, I want to thank everyone for their continued prayers and support. Even if you can't help with frontlinefaithproject.org, knowing that people are pulling for us makes a tremendous difference. But the need continues to exist. I just want people to know that even if we wind up not being in Afghanistan anymore, we still have personnel all over the world, many of whom do not have a Catholic chaplain available. And so a resource like this makes a difference for our personnel serving in harm's way or serving wherever they're posted in defense of our freedoms.
Yeah, still difficult to be away from family and challenge of the faith. Father, last comment?
I guess my last appeal would be to please continue to pray for our veterans. They're going through a hard time. There's so much happening out there that's not publicized about the homelessness and the addictive personalities, and they've done so much for us. They sacrificed so much for us. As this is, I believe, to be broadcast on Veterans Day, we owe so much to them. Continue to keep them in our prayers, always.
Excellent. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Laura. And I want to say also, write it down somewhere in your house. Put a sticky note on your desk. Write it on your chalkboard, on your marker board, on your refrigerator, wherever it is. Remember to pray for the military. Pray for our men and women and families. A lot of sacrifices are made. When you go to their website, frontlinefaithproject.org, you'll see a green button there. Frontlinefaithproject.org. Find the green button. That's your donate button right there. Remember, $24 puts an MP3 player in the hand of a soldier or a family member of a soldier somewhere in the world. Please, please, please prayerfully consider doing it, and then do it. Please, I beg you. Don't forget to pray for our military. Pray for all of our, past and even the future. The future soldiers that are going to sign up to go out there and continue to fight and defend freedom everywhere in this world, and pray for good, strong, holy military. All right, God bless you all. Thanks for being with us. Father, as only you can take us out.
Okay, well, may our Heavenly Father shine His face upon you. May He give you His peace. And may Almighty God bless you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. We'll see you next week.